Welcome to Battle Tested with Tanya Acker. Well, my friends, you know I love to talk about a court fight. Those are some of the most intense battles ever, not just for the participants involved, but also for some of the rest of us sometimes. And one of those in particular has really caught my attention, as it has that of probably the whole world, is the jury verdict against Meta and Google for $3 million that was based on harms that the plaintiff, a now 20-year-old woman, claimed that she endured as a result of consuming their social media products. The plaintiff in that case said that because of her consumption of social media and the way that those products were designed, she suffered from depression, body dysmorphia, some other issues. And the jury agreed with her and awarded her $3 million. Now, obviously, to those companies, to companies like Google and Meta, $3 million, that's like coffee money. I mean, it's not even coffee money. It's like almond milk upcharge in your cappuccino money. But there are thousands more of those lawsuits coming, thousands more in the pipeline. So it's going to be really interesting to see how different juries respond to those verdicts and whether or not there's any legislation that ever that comes about as a result. But in the meantime, I have here to talk with me Zayman Qureshi. He is the co-chair of Design It For Us, which is an organization that works on making social media safer for young people. He's also the social media coordinator for the Real Facebook Oversight Board, and he is a member of the Council for Responsible Social Media. So Zayman and I are going to try to break down what some of these claims are about. I'm interested to know what you think, and I do thank you very much for being here. Welcome to Battle Tested. Zayman Qureshi, I am so happy to see you again. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you, Tanya.
You are co-founder of Design It For Us. What is Design It For Us? Remind people what you do.
Yeah, so Design It For Us is a coalition of young people advocating for safer online spaces for our generation. We believe in safety and privacy by design. And so that means holding big tech companies accountable for their design features and ultimately the products that they build.
That's certainly in the news. I mean, I know you weren't directly involved with the case that Google and Meta just lost here in Los Angeles, but you certainly know a lot about it and you're close to those issues. Most people already know this. A 20-year-old woman, she's now 20. She and her mother sue not just Meta and Google, but everybody. A bunch of the other platforms settles. And so then the case goes to trial against Meta and against Google. And her claim is that those platforms contain design features that contributed to her body dysmorphia, anxiety, other issues. Tell us what you know about that case. And then I want to talk a little bit about what some of those features are.
Yeah, so in Los Angeles, a 20-year-old plaintiff named Kaylee, or we know her as KGM, in the lawsuit, brought a case against 4 of the major social media companies, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. And her claims are that the addictive nature of social media worsened her mental health as a young person growing up, and that there was a direct relationship between the cause of the products, the social media products in her life, and how her mental health manifested. And I think it was a landmark case for a number of reasons. One, it was the first of these bellwether cases, or essentially like the first plaintiff to get to trial in these cases. And I think what is significant about Kaylee's case is both that it was able to get to trial. Snapchat and TikTok settled with her before the case even began. And then at trial, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, was called to testify. Neil Mohan, who runs YouTube at Google, was also called to testify. And so you had these really significant moments throughout the course of the trial, which indicated that the big tech companies were really like up against the ropes in many ways throughout the trial. They presented evidence about the harms that Kaylee had experienced growing up and pointed to the evidence from employees inside these companies that showed that they knew that their products were causing harm to young people, and yet they lied about it. They covered it up. They did not take action when they were presented with evidence, and especially executives and leadership at these companies who were receiving often this information from their own employees, but not actually taking any action on it. And then for the jury in Los Angeles to side with Kaylee on all counts, finding Meta and YouTube liable, I think is extremely significant in a number of ways for what this means, what this legal theory can do to give plaintiffs some justice for the experiences that they had growing up online.
As you point out, it really is a bellwether. And in some ways, it's really being likened to the big tobacco cases. And so I wonder, do you think that it is the fact that these companies deceived or covered up or didn't respond to features that really kind of changed the game here? Or is it the nature of these features themselves? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is, what are they doing? And, I know we talked a little bit about this before when you were on the podcast some years ago, but what are they doing specifically that is causing the harm? Let's put aside the question of whether or not they disclosed it or whether or not they responded to it or whether or not they said, hey, these things are making kids stay online for too long. What are the specific features that are causing the harm?
Yeah, so the business model of social media companies is to keep users on the product for as long as possible. That's how social media companies make money. The more time that you spend on a product, the more money the company makes because they can sell ads, and the ad revenue that they generate is how their business model works. So when the incentives are geared towards are optimized for engagement, the harms that are downstream from engagement are actually not that surprising, because when you think about the optimization for keeping people on the product for longer and longer, that means that fundamentally the way that you build your product is not in touch with how normal human day-to-day interactions look like. It is about trying to keep you on for longer. And so some of the examples of this are infinite scroll, for example. At some point, years and years ago, your feed had a bottom to it. You got to the bottom and it was like, this is all the content we have to show for you today. And now it's infinite. And there will always be another piece of content for these algorithms to serve to you, whether that is from a followed account or from a recommended account. Like counts in particular came up throughout these trials as a quantification metric that young people were using for their self-worth. And so when they posted a picture, the quantification of their likes was attributed in many times to like how it made them feel about themselves. Beauty filters, location sharing information. And that's where it starts to get a little bit darker as well. A lot of these algorithms are optimized to connect people with as many people as possible, or to facilitate connections between people. This is where we see things like sextortion happening, related to predators finding young people on Instagram and trying to exploit them on these products. And so again, like the analogy here that I find is apt in kind of illustrating this is the analogy around the automobile, around cars. Like, it is incumbent on the automobile industry to ensure that their car is safe, that the product that they are building is safe when a driver gets into the car, and especially when a young driver gets into the car. It's not on parents to, look under the hood and inspect the engine and ensure that the car is going to be running safe and that the brakes are going to work and that the seatbelt and the airbags are going to work. You trust the automobile industry and the regulation involved behind it, that when you get into a car, you're going to be safe. And that's what ultimately the lawyers in this case were saying about social media companies, that the airbags were not checked, the brakes were not there, the engine could not be trusted to run as needed.
That's a lot of different things. And you're a super smart person. So I want to dig into some of that a little bit and maybe even play a bit of devil's advocate, because you're talking about different buckets of features. So if there's a feature that, say, maximizes the number of people to whom a minor will be connected to, I think most people could agree, yeah, absolutely dangerous. We don't need to put 14-year-olds in the feed. We don't need to have some 14-year-old in the feed of some, 50-year-old man who's like looking at bikini photos or what have you. Totally get that. What you started with is that there are a number of features that are designed to maximize engagement and maximize the amount of time that people spend on the platform. But that's really just their business. I mean, that's what TV companies do. On TV, you could sit and watch television and channel surf all day. There's no button, there's no automatic shut off that says you've been looking at too much television. So why is it any different? Tell me why on that front we should treat these companies differently.
Yeah, it's a good question, and this is something that we also hear from.
I know, but you're so smart. You got an answer. I know you do.
It's something that we hear from the tech industry as well, which is that they say, like, we're no different than the TV companies, than the media companies, than the video game companies. We just make a product that has media on it, and we are the host of that media. We're the host of user generated content. And I think the response to that is, your TV doesn't turn itself on and select the channel for you based on what it knows about you and creates a show for you based on all of the data points that it has gathered on you. Like, that would be an entirely different way of consuming media.
That would be so bloody scary. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah,
Can you
exactly.
imagine if you turned on the TV and because you watched, I don't know, whatever, Severance, all you saw were creepy shows about weird work environments. But it does actually, as I'm saying that, Zayman, it does. You go on any streaming platform, all you get are fed programs that are like programs that you watch.
Yep.
So actually, maybe the scary scenario, it's not that scary. I mean, I'm kind of happy to have programs recommended to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think algorithmic recommendations can be really helpful to people in scenarios like streaming, when you're looking to figure out what the next kind of piece of media that you want to consume is. The difference, I think, and the key difference with social media is that social media is designed to be addictive and designed to create a scenario where you are putting in place content that is going to elicit a reaction to the person consuming it to stay on the product for longer and longer. And I think that will always be different in regards to how streaming services or media companies produce their products. They're fundamentally different kind of approaches to how this is happening. And I think push notifications is a good example of this. Push notifications encourage you to go back to that particular app and consume content for more amount of time. Again, it's like your device is turning itself on and encouraging you back in. And the other forms of media just don't do that.
Can you connect some of her specific allegations and some of the specific harms that she alleged and successfully proved to the jury to some of these features? Like, for instance, the body dysmorphia, the depression. How did she connect those damages to what these companies were doing?
On the question about body dysmorphia, I think a good example is algorithmic recommendations. Oftentimes with these companies, we see that they see the amount of time that you spend looking at certain kinds of content and recommend more of that kind of content to you. Again, it's not about one piece of content here. It's about the stream of content.
When you say the stream, it's about what you are being shown, what is being pushed into your feed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the repetition of that kind of content over an extended amount of time. And so in KGM's case, it was the repetitive content of, bodies of the ideal body type that was put in her feed over and over by an algorithm that decided that this is what was going to engage her more. And so, these are the kinds of things that we see. It's not just one plaintiff, it's young people who are telling us within Design It For Us all the time, within young people across the country who are sharing their stories about what it's like to grow up on social media with algorithms that don't have guardrails, quite frankly. These companies have said to us for years that they are regulating themselves, that they ensure that body image content does not get recommended, disordered eating content does not get recommended on its algorithms. And yet, we find in the research and the tests that we do that happens over and over. We at Design It For Us conducted some research on Instagram teen accounts, which found that, our test teen accounts were recommended body image and disordered eating content. And so even in these like controlled scenarios, we're still seeing the companies not live up to their public promises.
I think what you're really saying, and what's a great response to the question I put to you, was that it's really a question of like the amount of force that these folks have, or rather that these companies have and that these technologies have to continue to push these images onto consumers. And so it's an amount of force that, we really didn't have in previous generations. I mean, so for instance, if you talk about young girls, I was one once. Like I didn't have a friend in middle school who wasn't on a diet, who didn't think, that like these are issues that are really kind of endemic, I think, to growing up, right? But now you've got a 300-pound gorilla in the room that's able to make what was already sort of a standard problem even worse. And they're able to contribute to it in ways that we previously haven't seen, right? That's the answer.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
That device and that product that you're using, social media, it follows you wherever you go. So whether you might have a conversation at school growing up, if you were younger, that conversation doesn't necessarily follow you home. Your social media does. It's in your bedroom. It's all around the house. It's wherever you go.
I am so glad I'm not one of those folks who wishes I was younger, because when I was in middle school and stuff went down at school, as it does, if somebody got teased as they did, if somebody was bullied as they were, like these things are things that are just a part of youth culture. I mean, kids do that. I'm not saying that they're good things and that we should take them lightly, but they happen. They've always happened. But when I was young and that happened, you got upset, you went home, you then went outside or did homework or whatever. And literally by the next day, like people were on to something else. Like it just didn't follow, it didn't stick. What do you say when people make that argument? Oh, the parents, like it's really the responsibility of the parents. Because in truth, I mean, I'm a child free by choicer, but my friends who have parents, my friends who have parents, all of them, but my friends who have kids, they tend to, put some screen controls on, like you can't have the phone down. They monitor screen time. What is your response to people who say, like, this is a parenting problem? This isn't a business problem.
Yeah. So to come back to your analogy of the 300-pound gorilla in the room, like we are asking parents to put up a finger and try and stop that 300-pound gorilla from charging straight at their kid. This is technology that is designed to deliberately be addictive. And so oftentimes, I think parents and kids get into this very adversarial relationship about social media and technology, where parents are frustrated with their kids. Why are you spending so much time on this? What are you doing? Like, why can't I have your undivided attention at the dinner table or when I'm talking to you about how your school day was? And in actuality, like the design of these products is to be addictive. We shouldn't be blaming young people for the fact that they are using something that has been handed to them that is addictive. I think to come back to the car analogy as well, like parents are trusting social media companies to get this right. And so when social media companies say that they are enabling parental controls, for example, that's great if they actually worked or if they were actually usable. We saw a metric in one of the lawsuits that said that 0.38%, so 0.38% of Instagram teen accounts have enabled parental supervision on those accounts. And
What was
that's
that
what
percentage again? Say that again.
0.38% of Instagram accounts have enabled parental supervision. And so what that means is that parents don't know what's going on, despite Meta touting its Instagram teen accounts as the answer to its child safety problems. The actual solutions that it's being presented with to parents are inadequate, and they're not finding parents where they need to. Furthermore, our research found that teen accounts were wholly ineffective. Over the course of 2 weeks, we did a trial of Instagram teen accounts and found that the professed protections under Instagram's teen accounts didn't actually work. They have something called sensitive content controls, which tries to create an age-appropriate algorithmic experience for young people. And we still found body image, sexualized content, drug content that was recommended to our accounts that were supposed to be teenagers. So for parents right now, like, this is what they're facing. This is what they're up against. And I think it's too much to put on parents and say, this is what you need to be doing and figuring out. This is why we need independent regulation from our governments to actually step in and say, we need to regulate these products as products that are designed by people for an explicit purpose, and take the foot off of parents who are already dealing with a lot in trying to navigate this digital ecosystem.
Aside from the fact that it sort of presupposes this perfect parent who's never existed. I mean, again, just to go back to a time when I was riding the bus to school, my mom said you can't wear makeup until you get to high school. And I put the makeup on the school bus with my other friends in middle school, and then we took it off before we got off the bus stop. So, like, this whole idea that parents are going to be able to protect against all of the things that society knows are harming children is a little bit that's a big fiction. What does a safer internet look like to you, Zayman?
Yeah, for me, a safer internet looks like one where young people have guaranteed protections in place, where we can independently verify that those protections are actually working the way that they need to be, and where young people can thrive. Like, there's so much opportunity to what being online could be. And that's not to say that young people aren't thriving on social media today, but they are also encountering all of these dangerous scenarios and effects on their mental health. And so, in the same vein, like, we need to be able to like put in place regulation on social media companies to create products that actually work for young people. The other thing is that for years, the biggest social media companies have consolidated their power over the tech industry. They've gobbled up competition, and they've become these trillion-dollar entities that are very difficult to compete with. So no matter how good some of the more human-centered technology products that are out there, the social media apps that are being created by people who actually do believe that you can have a safe experience or a worthwhile experience online without the addiction, without having to optimize for engagement, those apps never see the light of day because they have to compete with Meta and Google. And so one of the things that we're also asking for is more competition in the tech industry, because you could go back to a time where you had a lot of different corners of the internet that you could navigate to that would give you community, that would offer you an opportunity to connect with people in a way that was safe and navigated based on your interests and what you want to be doing. I think right now we're kind of like in this moment where we are controlled by the outcomes or the products that 4 companies make, that ultimately like a handful of people get to make the decisions around. wouldn't it be so much better if we had more choice in what we could go to, and that we would know that if we went there, our friends would be there and our family would be there, and that we could actually have a worthwhile experience? That's the kind of digital future we want to see.
Okay, I'm playing devil's advocate again. Assume that some additional regulation is necessary. How do you make sure that that regulation doesn't burden the incredible opportunity that social media has offered? I mean, especially for young people. I mean, my God, there are like kids. I don't mean to be patronizing, but there are people on social media who are now making more money than I did coming out of law school. That's for gosh darn sure. And who are have like, I have a job on television. I mean, there are kids who are like making serious bank because the platforms are really designed to lure people in, to speak to new varieties of consumers. How do you balance that? Because I mean, you'd agree that it has enabled opportunity in ways that are entirely new and frankly, exciting for a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I'm most excited about is the innovation that is coming out of the tech industry that is not by the biggest companies. It's by people, small platforms, small creators who are building things that are unique and interesting and going to revolutionize the way that we engage with social media and technology. That is the kind of digital future that we want to see. I think there are definitely kinds of regulation out there that can be overburdensome. But right now, we have no regulation on social media companies in the United States. That we have not attempted to create youth protections, or we have not passed youth protections for young people in the United States, despite attempts by Congress year on year to try and do this. And again, the tech lobby is very fierce and very firm in their resolve that there should be no regulation of this industry. So there are levels to this kind of regulation. The kind of regulation that Design It For Us advocates for is regulation that, frankly, I believe is common sense, is focused around the design of the products of social media companies and says these are the ways that you should create age appropriate experiences for young people. We're not saying you shouldn't be able to access certain kinds of content or communities if you choose to, that you can't, monetize your profile if that's something that you want to do as well. But like our what we're asking for is that there are affirmative regulations put in place to create safe experiences from the moment that you open an account on social media. And that both guarantees that there is access, that young people can still access online spaces while doing so in a safe way. And so I think what we're asking for is very reasonable. And I hope that lawmakers will feel the effects of the verdicts right now in their direction, because quite frankly, states are stepping up where the federal government has kind of failed in this area.
What are the three rules that you would implement? The three biggest changes?
We believe in a piece of regulation called the Age Appropriate Design Code. It's a piece of regulation that we've been advocating for in states like California, Maryland, Vermont, and passed it and signed it into law in those places. It's also come into law in South Carolina and Nebraska. And so it's really taking the country by storm at the moment as this approach of regulation. And it does some very basic things. One, it enumerates the specific design features that should be set to the highest safety settings by default. That would be kind of my first preferred protection in place. The second, I think, is privacy. Young people deserve the right to privacy over their data and their information. We should have the most private experiences for young people on social media so that there isn't endless data collection happening on these products. And then the third, I think, is that we should impose liability on these companies to build safe products. So when we know that they are not building safe products, we can hold them accountable to it. And if the incentive for them is to actually build safe products, we think that the incentives will be then to actually protect young people in the products that they are putting out into the market on a daily basis.
Well, it's because the regulation's not forthcoming that you're seeing all of these lawsuits. I mean, this Meta Google lawsuit, the KGM case, that's just a drop in the bucket. I mean, they're already lining up. And so, as is always the case, right? Like in the absence of, let's say, a rule or a law that specifically controls something, people are going to find a way, and they use the courtroom to find their way. I think that the other missing piece of this, or important piece of this, rather, on top of the fact that we're dealing with a new 300-pound gorilla in the room, is that this younger generation, I think, is challenged. And, my podcast is called Battle Tested, being tested in ways that are really, I mean, are just uh, hard for them. I mean, we're talking about a group of young people who grew up during COVID and didn't have normalized interactions, right? So part of me thinks that that's also a lot of what's driving a lot of this litigation. I mean, these aren't young people who had the privilege of having a normalized experience with the external world. They're particularly vulnerable. Do you think I'm right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of factors that weigh on Gen Z right now. I mean, you talked about COVID. We're, one of the first generations to have been normalized with school shootings. The, effects of climate change weigh on young people. We've seen our democracy in a very tumultuous time at the moment. And so all of those things, I think, create experiences for young people, which put a lot of pressure on us to have things figured out and navigate this very complex world. And to your point around COVID in particular as well, I think it's a good example of how normalized digital products became in our lives to support our connection over COVID. And again, like, that's not to say that there weren't incredible things that happened over a really difficult time in our country, in our world's history, to connect people together with one another. But it normalized a way of using online products to interact that I think we're still seeing and feeling the effects of, in the ways that these companies have used that to their advantage to get more young users on their products and to keep making money. And for a lot of these companies, that is the strategy. You need to be able to get young people on your product at a young age so that you have reliable consumer base for their lifetime. And so for these companies, that those are the metrics that they are looking for. And if they can optimize their products to appeal to young people, then they get the payday.
Call me when you're running for office, so I can have you back on. I'm not kidding. How did you find your way to this advocacy?
So yeah, I mean, this advocacy is personal to me because of what I've seen and experienced growing up online. I got involved in this work because of my concern and fear about how social media was being used to impact our democracy and our elections. And in particular, I think in 2018, when I was working for on a congressional campaign in the 2018 midterms, saw how social media was being used and how we were able to use it to turn out voters in a really tight election. It got me thinking about the ways in which it can be used for very nefarious ways as well. And so as I got older, it became a constant in my life about the ways that I was interacting and seeing the world. There was the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal, which I think we talked a little bit about last time when I was on the show. And, that was another big wake up call for me as well, that these really large companies have seemingly gotten away with, the ability to manipulate or use their products to manipulate people towards outcomes in elections. And so all of those factors contributed to where I've gotten today. And I'm really proud that there are so many young people who are doing this work right now. Design It For Us is a coalition of about 500 young people now from across the US. We're in 42 different states, and young people standing up every day for what they believe in and talking about their lived experiences, but also talking about their expertise and what they want to see out of a safer online world, both for themselves, but also for the next generation. And that gives me a lot of hope that there are more young people who are coming to this fight every day, who are taking on the fight for their generation and the next.
Did you ever personally have any kind of nefarious experience with social media? Was there a time when either something like a particular thing or just an accumulation of things just made you sort of feel like it wasn't making you feel good when you engaged with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was an accumulation effect. It was, being on Instagram at a young age, and also the products were changing very rapidly. Like, I remember Instagram when it was still a chronological feed, when the people I was following were like, the 30 friends that I had followed in school. And the interaction and the relationships that you built were very different at that time, versus like fast forward a few years when I was in high school, and the changes to the product were felt very rapidly. And, I think it was an accumulation of just that constant feeling of like, of needing to be on it, and the sort of like social pressure that came with it, but also that, content that was recommended to you by an algorithm designed to keep you hooked was, didn't make me feel good about myself all the time as well. And I could see that in my peers, and we didn't have the vocabulary at the time to talk about it, but we would acknowledge it in different small ways, I think. And, now that I'm older, I'm 23 now, and like can look back on that, I think about, the vocabulary I would have used at the time to like create a conversation, and to talk about it with my peers at the time. Cause I think it's tough for young people generally. Like, these are not this is not vocabulary that is easily accessible right now to talk about your online experiences as a collective. I think we talk about them a lot as kind of individual experiences. And it's okay. It's okay to talk about it as a collective because we are experiencing many of the same things together.
You are 23 years old, and truly one of the most articulate and thoughtful people on this issue that I've heard, because it really is an issue that's impacting your generation and those younger than you in ways that it doesn't the rest of us. So, here now at the ripe old age of 23, tell me what you're going to be doing in 10 years and tell me when I can sign up for your campaign.
I appreciate that. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing in 10 years.
That's a
I
good
think
answer.
this work is one that drives me every day, and the space and the community of organizations that are doing this work. It's not just me. It's not just Design It For Us. It's other youth advocates in this space and in other spaces. It's survivor parents who've lost their kids to social media related harms. It is moms across the country who are worried about how this is going to impact their kids in their day to day. It's teachers who are standing up and delivering the message. It's also lawmakers, I think, as well. As much as we have failed to regulate federally, I think there have been some really good cases of lawmakers stepping up and taking up the mantle. In New Mexico, for example, you had this other landmark verdict against Meta, which they found Meta liable on a set of counts related to consumer protection. And that was brought by brought by the attorney general of that state, trying one of these cases for the first time. So it is this like groundswell that I'm feeling like I am at the get to be privileged to be a part of at the moment right now. And I think that is my plan to continue that for as long as I can.
You're a badass warrior, my friend. I'm really proud to know you. Zayman Qureshi, co-founder of Design It For Us, social media protector of youth, first of his name, going into the fire and really trying to make a safer digital climate for young people and really for all people. But young folks are the most vulnerable. And honestly, on a very serious note, uh, it really takes people who are a part of a community Zayman to look after and try to make that community safe. So good on you for doing your part.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me, Tanya.
I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely.